Hi! Welcome to part 1 of a new series on my channel. This series is designed to make you comfortable with using Fusion in DaVinci Resolve, especially if you've never gone near it or you've seen a node graph and been scared off from using it. Everything you're going to see in this video will work with the paid version or the free version of Resolve. If you're already familiar with the basics of Fusion, you might want to stick around here anyway, as there might just be something new that's of use to you. I'm going to create this series of videos in bite-sized chunks. It's not my intent to have your eyes glaze over and put you to sleep. Rather, it's to keep things short and concise so that you can come away with some useful knowledge. This way you can immediately use it and practice with it. In between these videos, I highly recommend practicing your Fusion skills as you build them up from this series. A video will only take you so far. Practical experience will always be the best teacher. Wherever possible, I'll include downloadable copies of the assets that I use in the video so that you can recreate what has been done in the video. Our final result in this video will be this little logo reveal and light sweep. Our final result in the series will be to take this flat 2D JPEG logo with just a hint of help from Blender and create this. Enneagram Brewing Company, since 2010 exclusively in Ventura County, California. FYI, and speaking of Blender, like most 3D applications, it combines a layer-based workflow with a nodal workflow. We'll be talking about the node-based workflow in the Fusion page of DaVinci Resolve, and while the color page also implements a node-based workflow, for the most part, this is not our focus. We're interested in nodes in Fusion as well as other elements of Fusion. There are typically some lively discussions online around using node-based systems such as Fusion and layer-based such as After Effects. To be honest, there's no right or wrong answer. They can both achieve the same results. However, the more that you use one software type, the more that you'll become accustomed to that workflow. I used After Effects for many years before transitioning to the node-based system in Fusion. For me personally, once a project reached a certain size, layers could be challenging to manage. I asked David Simons at Adobe, who designed After Effects, if he was influenced by the layer design in Photoshop. But he said no, Photoshop had not implemented a layer workflow yet, and it was more likely an influence by the 3D applications that were in use at that time, which were all layer-based, such as 3D Studio Max or Lightwave 3D. Just remember that layers are not great for huge projects with many items and effects, and likewise projects with little footage and few effects are sometimes not the most efficient for nodes. What it really boils down to is personal preference. A reasonable rule of thumb is go big and go nodes, or keep it small and stick with layers. But for our purposes, it's going to be all nodes. We're going to start our journey into Fusion from the edit page here. As you can see, I have no timeline defined. I just have my two viewers active. In the media pool, I have a couple of clips and a couple of title elements, but no timeline. We'll close that for now and we'll go straight into Fusion. The reason you might do this with an empty project like this is if you just want to create some pure motion graphics just using the tools that are available inside of Fusion. That's one option, but there are many reasons why you might do this. I'll click on the Fusion icon down here in my page selector. I have two viewers just like I do on the edit page, but I don't have a source viewer and a timeline viewer. Instead, these are just viewer 1 and viewer 2. We'll examine these in more detail in a moment. Up at the top here, I have the normal pane selectors that I might have on other pages, such as Media Pool and Effects. We have some that are specific to Fusion, such as nodes, spline, keyframes, etc. The two viewers allow us to look at the output contents of a given node, and we'll be using these in a few moments. Below this, we have the time ruler, and this shows us where we're at in the clip that we're currently working on. It also shows us the starting frame and the ending frame for our clip. We can set a subset of frames within a given clip, which is called the render area. Next to this, we have a mute control, and we can turn the sound on or off. The other end over here, we have the current frame. Inside of our time ruler here, you can see I have a red marker. That shows me what the currently active frame is and acts as a playback indicator as well. We also have this indicator here, which shows us what frame the playback indicator is currently on. You can see it's changing as I move the playback indicator. You can also use the transport bar below to control the position of the playback indicator. Here, I can use this to go to the first frame, or this to go to the last frame, and I can use these playback controls as you normally would. I also have keyboard shortcuts for these. The open curly brace will put me to the beginning, the closing curly brace will put me to the end, and these are two that you're going to use quite a bit. There are some other keyboard shortcuts for these, such as J, K, and L for these three controls, and then Control open square bracket to go to the beginning, and Control close square bracket to go to the end. Below this, we have a toolbar. This toolbar contains a set of commonly used nodes. If we hover over any of these icons, it will tell us what that particular node is going to do. They're grouped into different sets here, and we'll be using these in a few moments. Below this, we have what is known as the work area. Right now, the work area has the node editor active, and we can also have a spline editor and a keyframe editor active down in the workspace along with that node editor. Most of our work is going to be spent in the node editor like this. Before we move on to our next step here, I did want to point out that in the description for this video, you're going to find a link to a Fusion hotkey cheat sheet. So you can print that out and keep it handy and see what all of the keyboard shortcuts are for Fusion at a glance. Alright, the next thing I want to do here is inside of Fusion, we're going to add a piece of content and see what happens. And we can do that by just adding a node. I have a number of different nodes up here, but I'm going to grab the one on the left here. This is the background node, so let's click that. Now we can see that it's created two nodes. This is only done because it didn't have any nodes previously. So if I had created a node, there was already a node in the node graph, it wouldn't create the second one. It's created a media out one and a background node. Let me zoom these a little bit here so that they're easier to see and easier to read. Zooming is done with Alt or Command plus the mouse wheel. You can adjust the view pan position with the middle mouse button by holding it down and dragging, and this also works for the two viewers. So we have two nodes, background, and media out one. You'll also notice that now it opened our media pool and we have a timeline one that it created for us. If we were to go back to the edit page now, we would see that we have something called Fusion Composition in our timeline. The Fusion Composition clip is a special type of clip that is used just for Fusion. Looking at our media pool, you can see the clip doesn't actually exist in the media pool. It only exists in our timeline. We can drag this and put it up into our media pool so that we can reuse it later or what have you. Now I'll go and shut down the media pool here and we'll come back to the Fusion page for just a moment. I'm going to close the media pool inside of the Fusion UI and point out a few things about our nodes here. First of all, you'll notice we have a line connecting them, and we can see that the line changes color when I hover over it. If you clicked on the blue side of the line, you would remove that connection. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. If I click on a node, we can see it has a blue arrow indicating an input here, and this white square here is the output. Below this, we can see that when I have a mouse hover over it, it has two dots down here. These two dots are telling us which of the two viewers up here the node is currently assigned to. We can see that Media Out 1 has a white dot on the rightmost, so it has been assigned to viewer 2 over here. If I press the number 2 while this is active, the Media Out turns off on viewer 2. If I press 1, you can see it now assigns it to viewer 1 over on the left here. If I press 2, you can now see it's assigned to both viewers. If I turn both of those off for a moment and I click over here on the background, I'll set it to number 2 and we can see that the number 2 viewer is now active. Now back on the edit page, when we have elements within our timeline, such as I have this fusion composition right here, if I click and select it, I have the inspector over here and I can adjust different parameters regarding this particular selected element. Well, the same thing is true over in the Fusion page for each of our nodes. Back on the Fusion page, if I click on this background node and then I click on the inspector here, we can see I have different values that I can set. Right now, the type of background sets a solid color. I can set it to gradient like that. And right now it's set to a linear gradient. And within the gradient settings, I can choose to set it to an angled gradient. So now that I have that, or a radial, or whatever happens to suit my fancy or satisfy my particular needs, we can always change these different values here, etc. And inside of the inspector, just like over on the edit page, if you double click on a given setting's name, it will reset that setting for you. In many of the inspector elements within Fusion, you're going to see that you don't have the little reset icon. So if we come back to the edit page and we bring up our inspector, we can see that we have this circular arrow along each of our controls that allows us to reset those controls. So for this example, let's say that I rotate this. I can hit this to reset it, or I can double click the name of the parameter and that will reset it as well. So over in Fusion, you can see that a lot of times parameters don't have the little arrow. So you just double click on the given element name and that will take care of resetting it for you. Returning to our edit page, let's have a look at what we have over here. We have our Fusion composition and then our media pool. I'm going to turn off the inspector and our media pool over here. And now we have this Fusion composition. So I'm going to get rid of all this and we're going to bring in our own content. We're now back to where we were. Our Fusion page is empty. We'll turn off the inspector over here and I'll come back to our edit page. And now we're going to add some elements to a timeline here. I have this bass boat and then I have this young lady here who is watching a window. The clips are currently stacked on top of each other, so in order to bring a clip into Fusion so that we can manipulate it there, we need to have the playhead in the timeline hovering over the clip that we want, and it's going to pick the topmost clip most of the time. You don't have to have the clip selected, the playhead just has to be over the clip. Now if I was to come over to the beginning of this and click Fusion, it's going to bring in the boat just like that, as you would expect. Now, let's say we have two clips next to each other like this, and we have a gap between them. What's it going to select if I choose Fusion here? Well, it chooses the leftmost top clip. Now, if there's nothing here, the playhead is over here, let's say. Again, it's going to choose that leftmost top clip. Through the magic of editing, I have everything arranged now in the timeline like I want. It's splitting the screen and it has text elements over each of the different clips. So what happens now with nothing selected and the playhead over the text elements and the clips? What happens if we go into Fusion? It picked the topmost video element. It won't bring these clips in unless we do something special. That special thing is to take all of our clips now that we want to manipulate them inside of Fusion and create a new Fusion clip just like we had previously. Now if we come up to the media pool, we're going to see we do have a Fusion clip up here. So when I created the Fusion clip down here in the timeline, it automatically added it to the media pool. Now I can rename it. I usually put a square bracket F on the beginning of these, and I'll just call it clips. Notice that down here it echoed the same name. So we can see that this is a Fusion clip. It has the name clips. Fusion clips also have these stars over here in the corner of the clip to indicate that it's a Fusion clip. Now, if you notice, right now our viewer isn't showing the content the way that I had it arranged. This is a bug in Fusion. So if we go over to Fusion now, we can see that Fusion actually shows it correctly. This checkerboard pattern says that this area is transparent, which is correct for our clips. Now I'm going to zoom out on our node graph here, and I do that by holding down Alt and using the scroll wheel, and that zooms it out slightly. So now we have a bunch of nodes here. We have media in 1, 2, 3, and 4, and these are each of the elements that I had back in my timeline. So I can press 1 on each of these, and I can see that it's a text for bass fishing. I can see that the text for window washing. This is a clip with the young lady washing the window, and this is the boat. And I'm doing this by pressing 1 whenever I activate one of these nodes to bring it into the number 1 viewer. By assigning a node's output to a viewer, it will override any previous node's output to that view and replace it with my new choice. Media out has automatically assigned over here to the number 2 viewer. We also have a number of nodes here called merge nodes, and we're going to talk about those in a moment. I want to talk about the bug that we have here. You'll notice that magically now it's fixed. And the reason that it's fixed is because I made a change inside of Fusion. So if we were to go back here and I was to undo the creation of that Fusion clip, we come back to Fusion, we can see it's just grabbing that topmost clip again like it's supposed to. I'll select all of the clips again, right mouse click, new Fusion clip. I'm not going to bother naming it because we already have Fusion clip 1 and that'll do for now. We come back to Fusion, we can see everything looks good. Back here again, it's not showing our composition properly. So let's come back to Fusion here. Back on the Fusion page where everything looks correct as opposed to our edit page where this bug in Fusion has manifested itself. I'm going to click on the Media in 1 node here to select it. I'm going to go to the inspector and I'm going to change the layer value to 1 and then back to 0. Any of the values in the inspector for this node will do, and just like that. Now, just by changing that value and setting it back to its original value, when I return to the edit page, it's now corrected the display bug that Fusion exhibited here. You won't always find this bug, but it's been fairly common for me. Back on the Fusion page now that we have everything corrected, let's have a look at these nodes. I'm going to select all of them with a lasso, click, and drag them up in the middle here, and I'm going to move this Media Out 1 node to the left a bit. And let's have a look at what we have here. We have each of our media elements, which are the 2 clips and the 2 text elements, and each one of these are being sent into the input of a merge node. Merge nodes allow us to combine elements, so this is the beginning of our chain. It goes to a merge node, which then eventually goes down through a couple more merge nodes until it comes to the last one here, and it sends the output of that, which is the white square on the right end of the node, to the media out, our final output destination here. So if I was to set number 1 on that, we could see it in both viewers. I can hit number 2 on it. It takes it out of this viewer here just so you get a firm idea of how that works. Now, you also notice that these change color when I hover over them. We're going to take a look at a couple of different things here, but I'm not going to use this particular project to illustrate some of these node characteristics. We're going to do that by creating our final project in this lesson, which is our Formula 1 car revealing a logo and then our little light sweep across the logo. Before we move on, I want to talk real quick about why we want to use a Fusion clip, or why we would convert our existing media in our timeline over to a Fusion clip. So let's say we have this clip here, and if we go over to the Fusion page, it brings a clip in just fine, and we could do whatever we like here inside of Fusion with it. Looks good, not a problem. Now let's come back over here and let's say that I've gone into the color page and I've set it to monochrome, and then let's say I've also zoomed the clip like this on the edit page. Okay, now we go over to Fusion and it's thrown away everything we did. It got rid of the monochrome effect and the zoom is also gone. This is why you want to use a Fusion clip. Once I set that to be a Fusion clip, you'll notice that now the Fusion clip thumbnails are all reflective of my changes to the clip, and when I go into Fusion, all of my changes are indeed there. So that's the main reason you're going to want to use a Fusion clip and convert your media into a Fusion clip before going into Fusion. Generally speaking, you will want to have finished your edit and color corrections prior to applying Fusion effects to a given clip or project. Additionally, if you have multiple clips stacked up on top of each other, as we did in the previous example, and you want to bring all of those elements into Fusion as a single element to work on inside of Fusion, you're going to want to combine them all into a Fusion clip. That way you can edit each of the discrete elements inside of the Fusion page. Alright, let's move on to our final project here in the video, which is our Formula One logo reveal and light sweep. Alright, for our final project here, we reveal a logo and then do a light sweep on the Formula One logo. We have an empty project, but we do have some media to work with. We have our Formula One car and our Formula One logo PNG file. So I'm going to double click the footage and bring that into the source viewer. We'll set an out point on the clip. That should be about good right there. I press O to mark out and drag this over to here, and I'll say overwrite, and that creates a timeline for us and puts the clip into the timeline. Let's have a quick look at it. We can actually stretch that out just a hair just to pick up the rest of that engine noise as it goes by. All right, now I'm going to create a Fusion clip out of this. We'll give it a name just as good practice. Square bracket F square bracket F1 racing car. Okay, now let's get over to Fusion and see what we've got. We have two nodes. The media in one node is the input to our processing, which will occur here. If I hit 1 on it, it'll go to the first viewer just like that. I'll turn that off for now by hitting 1 again. Looking at our node, we can see we have a blue arrow here, which is for an effect mask to be input into the node. And over here, we have the white square. And the white square is always output, just as it is on Media Out 1 over here. Media Out 1 only has an input and an output. And that's it. On our media in one node here, we can have a mask, but if we want to combine something with our media in or do something else with it, we'll need to add another node to deal with that. And what we're going to do is we're going to go up to our media pool here, and we're going to find our PNG logo. We're going to add it to our node graph down here. I'll close the media pool so we get our nice viewer size back there. On the media in 2 here, we can see we have the same thing. A mask input here and an output right there. Now, if I wanted to combine the elements of media in 2 node with the media in 1 node, I would need to be able to merge these two pieces of media together. As you saw previously, there is a merge node that we can use for this purpose. I can click on this in the toolbar and it will add it to the node graph just like that. To add it in between these two nodes, I can either click where I see the blue and that will disconnect the node, and then click on the white block and drag it up into the yellow input right here. Then I would take the output of the merge 1 node and put it over to the input on the media in 1 node, and that would create our connection. I can also use Shift to manipulate the connections. If I hold down Shift on the selected node and click and drag it, it will take it out of its connection. The opposite will happen if I select a node and drag it into an existing connection. This works on most nodes, not just the merge node. Another way to do this is if I was to delete the merge node, I can take this F1 media in here and I can just connect it to that output, and it will create a merge node for me just like that. Now let's look at the merge node itself. It has multiple connections on it, as you can see. We have the normal output here, and then we have a yellow arrow input, a green arrow input, and a blue arrow input. These colors are consistent across all nodes. They will always have these colors and they will always generally mean the same thing. So if we go down to the blue one, it says effect mask. So we know we can input a mask to this and it will apply to whatever is being processed through here. We'll get to masking in a few minutes. If we hover over this, we can see this is the background, so the yellow arrow going in is a background, and the green arrow going in is a foreground. You can think of these like layers in a Photoshop project, where the foreground input here is like the topmost layer, and the background is a layer below that, so the foreground layer takes precedence. Now this mask input here is going to only apply to the foreground element, not to the background element. If I wanted to mask the background element, I would apply the mask over here. Same thing, I can apply a mask up here on this input, but we're not going to do that. We're actually going to create a mask and we're going to input it here. I need to do a couple of different things here. One thing I need to do is this F1 logo here is much too large and it's not in the right place. And if I look at the inspector controls, they change for every type of node that I'm using. And if I look at my media in 2, which is my Formula 1 logo, I hit 1 twice there to show that up in viewer 1. I can see that I don't have controls over rotation or position or scale. So I'm going to need a node that will do that for me. That node is called the transform node, and it's right here. So I could just click on it and it will add it like so. Or there's a couple of other ways I could do this. I can right mouse click in the workspace area and I'll get a context menu. At the top is Add Tool. An easier way to do this is to use the tool menu. I hit Shift Space and it brings up this menu. Now I can type in trans and it shows me transform. I double click on that and it adds it in. Now if I had the media in 2 selected when I did this and transform was added, I could just click add here and it's going to automatically connect it for me. It put it right in between the media in 2 and the merge for me. You can see that it took the input going into the foreground and it has a yellow input, which is just input. It's not a background input. If we had 2 types of inputs on here, then this would say background and the other one would say foreground, and we would have an effect mask input over here. Now another thing we can do is disconnect the transform from the merge. We can hold down the right mouse button as we click and drag a connection. By doing that, we'll be given a context menu that lets us choose which of the inputs on that node we can use to do the connection. In this case, it shows that background is already in use with the check mark, but foreground and effect mask are available. We want foreground, and it will do the connection to the foreground for us. Back on our transform node in the inspector, we can see that we have size and angle and center X and Y and all kinds of lovely things. So the first thing I'll do is I'll size it down about like that, and then I'm going to move it up and down right about here. And I'm going to size it down so it fits in between our tire marks on the ground there, just so a hair of concrete is visible. Then I'll move it over this way slightly. Okay, that looks good to me. Now we need to be able to take this out of the picture so that it looks like the car is revealing it. Obviously, that's not happening here. To do that, we're going to need a mask, and we're going to use a polygon mask. And in Fusion, just like everywhere else in Resolve, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I could use a rectangle mask here, but I'm going to use a polygon mask because I'll get to show you how to use the polygon mask a little bit. I'm going to select the merge node so that it's the active node, and then I'm going to add the polygon node. Here I can add it from here on the toolbar, or I can add it with Shift Space, which is my tool menu, type poly just like that, or I can actually do it from my effects menu up here just like I have on the edit, cut, and color pages. In the search input, I type POLYG, then activate tools, and here it is polygon. I can add it that way, and it added the polygon for me, and I'll put it down here. As you can see, there's multiple ways we can add nodes. You don't just have to use this toolbar up here, and it certainly doesn't have everything in it. If we get rid of my search criteria up here, you can see there's actually quite a few nodes that you can use inside of Fusion to do all kinds of effects. Now we have our nodes set up. This is all we're going to need to do for what we're going to do here. The polygon automatically got sent to the mask input of the merge node. Now in this instance, I have media in 2 as my foreground and my media in 1 as my background. If my foreground was larger than my background and I wanted to mask it to fit inside of this, the merge would help them fit, but if the mask was going into media in 2, it would be scaled by the size of that node, and it wouldn't necessarily scale at the final output, so the mask might not work properly there. So by putting it into the merge node here, it will actually create the right size mask for when it merges both of these elements together into the same resolution and outputs them over here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to click on the polygon here, and you'll notice right now our F1 logo is missing, and in fact nothing that I do here is going to reveal it, and the reason for that is because when we added this mask, it hid everything. I can disconnect it here and see that it's back, and we'll take this and reconnect it, and now the entire logo is missing. So we need to invert the mask so that we can see the F1 logo. Now we will create the actual custom mask that fits around the F1 logo. I'm just going to left click right here to start creating it, but it helps if the polygon node is selected. So now you can see I have a plus sign, and that indicates if I click, I'll add a point to my polygon mask. I'm going to do that and add another one up here, and we can adjust these points after the fact. After we've created all but the final point, I come over to the first point that I created, and it has a circle to let me know it's going to complete the polygon and make a mask for us just like that. Now that the mask is finished, I can actually click on any of the points that I created and move them around to adjust them in case I'm not happy with where they're at. So I can click on that and bring it over a little so it's a little more squared up on the end there. Take this one over here and bring it over this way a little bit, just like that. So now it's a little bit neater on our clip. You'll notice that we have this orange dot here, which is a keyframe indicator, but it isn't associated with any of the controls. And what this keyframe indicator is showing us is that there is a keyframe because it's orange. I'm going to turn it off because I don't need a keyframe right here, right now. But what it is actually keyframing is the shape of the polygon mask. So if we want the shape of the mask to change over time, I could keyframe it right here just like that, and then we can move up to here and I could grab this corner and pull it back like that, and then I could come up to here and pull this corner over like that, and then when I come back to here I now have a few keyframes, and you can see that they're indicated in our timeline ruler here as these white tick marks. That lets us know where a keyframe is at in the time ruler. You could jump between them with the Alt or Command plus the left and right arrow keys. So now when I play this back, you'll see that the mask will change its shape just like that. I don't need these keyframes, so we're going to go back and get rid of them. So now we don't have our keyframes anymore. What we are going to do is we're going to animate the position of the mask. Because if you notice when I change its position, it starts to reveal our logo, and that's what we want it to do. So let's move our playhead up until we see the car move into position where it would start showing the logo. I'm going to set a keyframe here. This is our X and Y position for the mask. I'm going to keyframe that right here. And then I'm going to say with the right arrow key, 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to slide the mask over just like that. And technically I could do this without moving the mask. I could animate where the edge of the mask is by using the keyframe element down here, but I'm going to do it by actually sliding the mask along. 1, 2, 3, line our mask up and reveal more of the edge of it. There we go. 1, 2, 3, and this happens fast enough that we don't need to be perfect with it. 1, 2, 3, and that should be the last one. And there it is. Now you'll notice we have our keyframe tick marks in our timeline ruler here. We come back to here and we play it by clicking the play here, or I could hit the space bar. The car is in place and away it goes, revealing our logo as it should. Back on our edit page here, we have our final race car logo reveal clip here, which we finished up. There it is. I'm going to stop it right there because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to the media pool here and we're going to get the Formula 1 logo and bring that into the timeline and drop it in over our existing clip. We're doing that so we can line the logo up with the version that's in the clip. With the logo selected, I'm going to set its opacity to half so I can see how it's aligning with the one in the video clip. We're going to reduce its size way down like so, and we're going to move it around a little bit here, see if we can line it up real quick. Okay, that looks pretty good, and then we can reset the opacity back to 100. So now I'll take the F1 logo here and I'm going to put it on the end of our clip, and I'm going to set a cross dissolve here, 24 frames like so. So now we get that effect. Let's take this into Fusion and we're going to make a light sweep occur, and I think this point here in our timeline ruler is good. That's where I was at in the edit page over here. Back to Fusion here, we have our media in and our media out. I'm going to move that over here, and again, to move that, I press down the middle mouse button and click to drag. Okay, we're going to need two things here. We're going to need a glow effect that creates a light sweep, and we're going to need a mask. So let's get the glow effect in here first. I'll hit Shift and the space bar and I'll type glow. You can see we have three of them here, and I want this middle one. This one has more options, and the soft glow isn't going to give us the effect we want. This is the old glow from the original Fusion, and this is an enhanced version that doesn't have the parentheses and GLO on it, so we're going to use that one. Click on Add, and it gets added in here for us. As you can see, we now have this glow effect affecting the entire logo, which is what our media in one is here. Now I want to mask this, and to do that we're going to do a rectangle. So I will add that from the leftmost spot in the masking part of the toolbar. Move our rectangle up just a little bit here, and we're going to angle our rectangle like so. And we're going to make it a bit narrower. I'd say right about there should do the trick. It doesn't need to be quite so wide since we're sweeping outside the logo at that point. Right about there should do the trick, and now we'll go down to our glow and we're going to set alpha limits effect. And that way, it won't put the glow effect outside of the logo. It'll only affect the logo with the alpha limits effect enabled. We're going to add some gain to it and a little bit of gamma here, and then we're going to saturate it as well. You'll see how that works in just a minute. But now back to our mask, I want to change the soft edge on it. We'll do that with that. Now you'll notice that it looks red. We're going to control that by coming back here and killing that saturation just like that. So actually, if I wanted it to be a red highlight that went across here, I'd bring that saturation all the way up or to some value that suits my purpose. But we want a nice white light sweeping across. Now if we come up to here, we can see our soft edge is probably just a bit much there, so I'm going to bring that down to right about there. I think that should do the trick. Now I'm going to move it over this way just outside of the logo, and we're going to set a keyframe for that position. Now I'm going to press the space bar to play it, give me an idea of how long I want it to run for. That should be good right about there. So we're at frame 63 here, and now I will take this X and move it over this way, and now we should have our effect. I click off of the mask and into the blank workspace area to clear the mask controls from the display. Now playhead back to here, hit the space bar, and there's our light sweep. Let's go back to the edit page and see how that looks. Back on the edit page, let's run the whole thing. Okay, the car is in place. It reveals the logo for us. And there's our light sweep. So the only other thing I would do here is I'd add a bit of sound effects. So I'm going to do that real quick. I find that sound effects like that will enhance when you do effects like the light sweep. A little whooshing sound or a bass drop. Okay, that looks good. As a quick addendum before we wrap things up here, I neglected to mention this one feature, and it's important to know this feature and how to use it. It will make your life a lot easier. And that is that all the nodes that we have here have kind of cryptic names that aren't really descriptive of what they do or what their contents are. So we can rename them, and we do that by pressing F2 with the appropriate node selected. Now I can type a name in, so this would be F1 logo. Media in 1 will name race car clip. You can't have spaces in these, but you can still be fairly descriptive. So our transform will be F1 logo X form. Merge, well, we know what that does. Come down to our mask. I'll change that to logo mask. We can even rename media out 1 to be final result. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out that you can do this. It makes working with these nodes a lot easier if you've got a descriptive name on a given node so you know exactly what it's doing, what it's affecting, or what it contains. Alright, that wraps up this episode. It ran a bit longer than I intended. The next one will be shorter, I promise. Make sure you take the time to practice with Fusion. It'll help your learning process and boost your confidence with this very powerful tool. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned something, and make sure to subscribe and click the little bell icon. That way you'll know when the next episode is uploaded and you can come back and watch it. Again, don't forget that we have assets for this that you can download so you can follow along with all of this, and those are linked in the description. If you like the video, please click like. That helps other folks find it. So there you have it. Until the next video, take care.